Hello friends, today's session will deal with group formation and structure. We will also be looking at the influence of position, roles, status, norms and rank for their influence in group behavior. To begin with, when people come together and form groups, they do it for a specific purpose. It could be something very well defined like completing a task or dealing with a project or attending a meeting for a specific purpose, or it could be something not very well defined such as having common likes and dislikes or a group of people coming together for a social cause. So, due to various reasons people form groups. There is also the matter of man being a social animal, that is coming together and forming groups addresses social needs of individuals. Group formation usually goes through certain stages. A group does not develop and function just like that all on its own. It goes through certain stages, and irrespective of the reason why people come together and form groups, generally group formation goes through certain well defined phases. These are the stages of forming, storming, norming, performing and adjourning. Forming is the very first stage of group development process. What do we mean by forming? As the word itself, as it is evident from the word itself, forming is the stage where people come together. This is the first stage and the initial phase of group formation. So, while there is anxiety and uncertainty, there is a sense of excitement and optimism during this stage among the members of the group. The second stage in group formation is the storming stage. After the initial euphoria of coming together, reality sets in. People realize that there are differences of opinion in terms of how to go about reaching the goal, what needs to be done, who needs to do what, and how to progress in a smooth manner towards reaching their desired goals. So, storming is a stage which involves a lot of intra-group conflict. During the storming stage, conflict rises within the group, and this leads to lot of frustration, anxiety and even dissatisfaction among group members. So, storming is also characterized by anxiety, but instead of the positive impact seen in the forming stage, during the storming stage, the intra-group conflict tends to pull down people. The anxiety tends to have a negative impact. The group then figures out some common ground. The group then finds a balance. The members come to some kind of an agreement as to how to go about functioning as a group rather than as a collection of distinct individuals. This marks the third stage of group formation, and this is called norming. Norms develop, that is, certain prescribed and certain undefined but at the same time accepted rules emerge for the functioning of the group. So, norming stage is characterized by close relationships developing within the members of the group and the group members exhibiting cohesion within the group. Close relationships and cohesions form the hallmark of the norming stage of group development. Once the group norms are established, once the people more or less get an idea as to whose role is what and how to go about things, the next stage or the performing stage begins. This is the stage where there is a high degree of cohesion, the maximum level of activity and goal directed behavior is seen during the performing stage. As the name itself suggests, performing stage is when the group members are totally focused on driving the group towards their desired end state. During the performing stage, the group is thus fully functional. We see various traits and characteristics of groups such as cohesion, teamwork, leadership being displayed during this stage of group formation. Performing stage is followed by the final stage of adjourning. Once the group reaches its stated goal, then the group generally adjourns, or the purpose for the group to be in existence is no longer there. So, the group disbands. This is especially seen in task groups or in formally defined groups where people come together for a clearly stated purpose, project or a department that is created to address specific needs. Such groups usually go through this final stage of adjourning. However, informal groups or groups which continue to find reasons for existence do not reach adjourning stage. They might morph into something different, or they might find a new purpose to continue as a group. Informal groups like friends. What actually defines or what is the reason why people come together, why they develop friendships? A group like a group of friends serves multiple purposes. So, such groups tend to continue for a much longer period of time, and so the stage of adjourning may not be well defined or very evident in such groups. In groups which do go through the adjournment stage, separation anxiety marks this stage. People are more interested in winding up their activities, and anxiety related to the fact that they will no longer be coming together and working. This particular set of people, this particular group of people will no longer be functioning together, and so there is a degree of separation anxiety seen during the adjourning stage. Let us now look at the next topic, group structure. Groups function effectively when there is some kind of structure. What do we mean by structure? Structure gives the form to the group. Structure clearly defines who is what, how things need to be done, who has status, what role do people play, what is the position of each individual vis-a-vis the others, who gets to make the decisions, how is it done. So, all these issues are well addressed when there is a well defined structure to the group. So, group structure is an important concept we need to look into. Ad hoc and newly formed groups find it difficult to orient themselves towards the task on hand because there is lack of clarity in terms of how to proceed with it and who gets to do what. So, in terms of productiveness, in terms of productivity, ad hoc and newly formed groups, due to the lack of structure, fail as compared to well established groups with clearly defined structures. The newly formed groups start functioning only once they have achieved some kind of structure. So, structure is very important for all group processes, including problem solving and decision making. A group consists of a mix of individuals with various personality traits. So, a group also contains some clearly defined roles. Now, what happens when there is a mismatch between the personality traits and the roles defined in the group? I, for example, might be a very aggressive kind of a person, but suppose I am expected to be very submissive and very calm in terms of my interactions with clients. So, my role as a member of the group called the work group demands that I be passive and take on a passive role, whereas by nature aggression or aggressive type of behavior is what dominates my personality. So, in such cases, what happens? Studies have shown that individuals with personality traits which do not match with the roles prescribed in the groups find a way to fit into the group when there is clearly defined structure in the group. So, the structure actually helps individuals to find a way to acquiesce to the requirements of a group. Hence, individuals are capable of learning how to use the structure to fit into their prescribed roles. Now, groups could have a centralized or a decentralized structure in terms of their decision making. So, would the structure of a group impact the performance? This is a question that several studies tried to address, and what did they find? They found that in terms of simple problem solving exercises, or when the issues that need to be dealt with are simple, in such cases a centralized group was found to be more effective rather than a decentralized group in terms of response, in terms of the time taken to reach a solution, and in terms of action or delivery of the solution to a specific problem solving situation. Centralized groups were found to be more effective than decentralized groups when the problem on hand was a simple one. But when the group is trying to address a complex problem, decentralized decision making was found to be more effective. A decentralized structure, in fact, helped in finding multiple solutions and thereby quickly reaching a more workable solution when the problem on hand was complex. Researchers and psychologists have opined that since our real life involves complex problems, since there are multiple issues and variables affecting any given situation, in fact, decentralized structure in groups would probably be more effective in ensuring that the groups can work cohesively towards their goals. Studies have found that centralized groups are better in terms of speed and avoidance of errors when there are simple problems on hand. But in every other instance, in every other situation, decentralized groups are in fact far more effective. When we look at the group members, individuals in key positions in centralized groups have a greater degree of autonomy and a greater degree of independence when it comes to functioning within the groups. This independence and this autonomy helps them to be free. This independence and autonomy helps them to be free to solve problems quickly and address the issues on hand. A simple problem involves limited information, and since limited information needs to be coordinated, in a centralized group, individuals are far more effective because of the autonomy, because of the independence afforded, and given that the information that needs to be coordinated is limited, key people in centralized groups could help in the decision making process far more effectively and in a time bound manner. But when a complex problem needs to be addressed, the individuals are saturated with data. This excess of information that needs to be organized, filtered and sorted out while addressing the problem actually makes it complex for the person to handle and reach a decision, solve a problem. So, centralized groups vis-a-vis decentralized groups are less effective in terms of solving complex problems. However, later studies have contradicted these results and they have proved that centralized groups are better at decision making as compared to decentralized groups, irrespective of the kind of problems in hand. The advantage that decentralized groups have is in terms of dealing with the environment, is in terms of their flexibility. Since the decentralized groups are more flexible, they are better equipped to deal with environmental changes. This in fact is closer to how things happen in a real world as compared to an experimental situation. A real world involves lot of changes in the environment, involves a more dynamic environment. So, flexibility within the groups as accorded by a flexible structure like decentralized groups would actually be handy and would actually improve group performance rather than centralized groups. So, decentralized groups are better equipped to adapt to novel situations. Further, decentralized groups are also found to be more open to feedback. The flexibility element ensures that their openness to feedback actually improves group performance. So, group structure in terms of whether the group is centralized or decentralized has an impact on the effectiveness of group performance. Let us now look at how position, roles, status, rank and norms influence group behavior. What is position? Any social unit can be divided into positions. For the sake of simplicity, let us consider a social unit family. A family can be divided into father, mother, son, daughter, brother, sister, etc. So, a position is a clearly defined part of a social unit and it carries with it certain responsibilities as well as certain privileges or rights. Each position in a group can be occupied only by a person with the requisite qualifications. So, based on the position of a person in a group or the position of a person in a social unit, how the group member behaves would be influenced by the position he or she occupies in the group. Let us now look at another concept, that is rank of an individual in a group. What do we mean by rank? A rank is usually a clearly defined and a formally designated title that is given to a group member for being part of the group. So, a rank is formally defined. It is well defined, clearly stated, and usually it is reflective of a hierarchy within the group. For example, the rank of a colonel in an army. So, whenever we meet someone, say colonel so and so or lieutenant so and so, we understand the person as having a certain rank within the organization or within the social unit called army. Every rank has a clearly defined place within that hierarchy. Let us now look at the concept of status within group and the influence of status upon group behavior. Status refers to an individual standing in a hierarchy. What do we mean by status? Status is a combination of where a person figures within a hierarchy and how a person is perceived in the context of the group by other group members and relevant others. So, while position refers to a place in a social system, status refers to the amount of prestige that may be attached to a person in that particular position and fulfilling a certain role. So, status refers to the added element of prestige that comes into the picture. Status of a position is hence explained and defined in terms of power, prestige and exclusivity. An individual's status in a group is always dependent on how others perceive him vis-a-vis the rest of the group. So, status is always dependent on the perception of others. Groups always have differences in terms of the status accorded to members within the group. Sometimes it is due to the variety of positions in the group. At other times it is due to various other reasons, other factors such as the knowledge the person brings into the group, how long a person has been associated with the group, individual contribution and a variety of factors. Studies of group behavior have shown that higher status is accorded whenever there is seniority in the group. In other words, when a person has been associated with the group for a very long time, then the person is accorded higher status. If I have to explain this in terms of an example, let us consider two managers in an organization. Both carry the same designation and both are probably seen as equals in terms of the hierarchy or the position within the organization. But one member has been with the organization for the past 1 year, whereas the other person has been with the organization for the past 5 to 6 years. Now, the status accorded to a senior member is higher as compared to a status of the person who has been with the same organization or the same group for a shorter duration. So, status within a group is higher for a person who is senior in terms of their association with the group. Physical attributes also have an impact on the status accorded within a group. Attributes like height. Someone who is taller is seen and is accorded higher status than another group member who is shorter in stature. While this physical attribute may or may not really impact a group member's performance, studies have shown that physical attributes like height do have an influence on the status accorded within a group. People who are perceived as representative of the group are accorded higher status within the group. So, people who are seen as representing all that the group stands for are given higher status as compared to other members in the same group. In fact, studies have shown that people behave differently depending on the status accorded within the groups. People with higher status are found to act differently, behave differently as compared to those with a lower status. People with a lower status in a group tend to confirm more, tend to agree more in the context of group decision making and in the context of behaving or their behavior within groups as compared to people with higher status. Let us now look at the concept of roles in the context of groups. A role is a pattern of behavior expected from a particular individual in the group context. This depends on the position he or she occupies in the group. So, roles are sometimes well defined within a group and sometimes roles grow upon people. People gradually take upon themselves certain roles, though this has not been defined in the initial stages of group formation. Each and every one of us take upon ourselves multiple roles in our lives, and the roles which we internalize tend to have a lot of effect on how we look at life and carry ourselves in the context of groups and in any interpersonal context for that matter. So, roles actually contribute to and become a part of the self-identity of individuals when the roles are internalized by group members. Norms are rules or expectations which are set within the groups for the behavior of group members. How a group member should behave or should not behave is defined by the norms of the group. So, what happens when there is a dissenting group member? Let us look at one particular kind of norm, that is individualism versus collectivism. Now, if a person highly identifies himself or herself with the group and if the norm of the group is individualism, then dissension by the group members is tolerated. But if the norm is collectivism, not individualism, then what happens? In such cases, if there is a high degree of identification, then this impacts the response of the other group members. Whereas, when there is low degree of identification with the group, irrespective of the norm, dissension has no effect on the individual's responses to group. So, norms are the rules or the expectations which are defined in terms of how a person should or should not behave in the context of the group.